Okay, let's turn to that big global story that's been making the news for the last 24 hours and the latest twist to the Orlando massacre. The worst terror strike on American soil since 9/11 has really shattered the world. Remember, more than 50 people were killed and many wounded after an American-born ISIS sympathizer opened fire in a gay nightclub in Orlando. Let's take a look at the timeline first of that dastardly terror attack.
A scene of panic was witnessed outside the Orlando Pulse nightclub as a hostage-like situation unfolded in Florida. Bringing an end to a 3-hour-long standoff, police crashed into the building with an armored vehicle and killed the gunman Omar Mateen.
Oh my God, they're all...
At 2 a.m. on Sunday night, armed with an assault rifle and pistol, an American-born man who had pledged allegiance to ISIS had opened fire and locked himself inside the gay nightclub.
See behind me, just right there, the FAR cop car over there. As you can see, the sirens and the lights are on. Just behind that cop car, about a block away from there, is the nightclub where the shooting happened. Now, I also spoke with a bunch of locals who live around the area, and they have told me that they heard several gunshots. As a matter of fact, dozens of gunshots, and it looked like that there was somebody inside also shooting back at the victims and whatnot, but that story has not been confirmed.
The individual believed to be responsible for the terror attack at the Orlando Club Pulse early Sunday morning has been identified as Omar Mir Sadiq Martin, age 29, an American citizen born in New York. He died of an exchange of gunfire with police officers.
While many are still coming to terms with the terror strike, family members of the victims continue to search for their loved ones.
Boyfriend has been shot multiple times and is in the emergency room. But I don't know where my son is. No one can tell me where my son is.
And hours after the attack, the dreaded terror outfit's link also emerged. Not only did the Orlando shooter call 911 around the time of the attack to pledge allegiance to ISIS, but the Islamic State also claimed responsibility for the worst terror attack on American soil since 9/11.
Although it's still early in the investigation, we know enough to say that this was an act of terror and an act of hate.
Startling details about the gunman also emerged. US media reports claimed that Orlando shooter was a homophobe and a wife-beater. The brutal mass murder of innocents has exposed the loopholes in the security apparatus in the United States, and the worst US mass shootings in the last 25 years serves as a grim reminder of the global threat posed by ISIS. Bureau Report, India Today.
Remember, more than 50 people have been killed in the terror attack which took place on Saturday night in Orlando, but more details are now emerging about the disturbed mental state of Omar Mateen. More about the man who masterminded and executed the bloodshed.
This is the face of Orlando terror attack, Omar Mateen. The man who killed over 50 people and executed possibly the biggest attack in the US after 9/11. This 29-year-old American of Afghan descent got married in 2009. But his ex-wife reveals that Mateen was emotionally and mentally disturbed and extremely violent.
Instability, emotional instability, sickness, he was mentally unstable and mentally ill. That's the only explanation that I could give, and he was obviously disturbed. My family literally rescued me. The night that they were there, they had to pull me out of his arms.
The imam of the local mosque that Mateen attended for around 10 years also paints a picture of a man who was quiet and hardly ever interacted with others.
And I felt so bad for all the innocent poor people who were killed. And then it was a double, triple fold tragedy for us that something happened and it has a link and a relationship to us. So I was much more in shock and in tragedy than anybody else.
Mateen's father also revealed that he was a homophobe and had recently been extremely offended to see two gay men expressing affection on a Miami street. Reports also suggest that he had been on the radar of security agencies in the United States and swore allegiance to ISIS.
It's crazy to see that something like that can come from such a small town. You never know.
While America is not new to terror attacks, this incident has certainly proved that radical Islam is only strengthening its foothold in the US. Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining me now is Praveen Swami, National Editor, Strategic and International Affairs at the Indian Express, who's actually tracked the Islamic State's growth in India as well. Daniel Benjamin, Director at the Dickey Center at Dartmouth College and former Ambassador at Large and Coordinator for Counterterrorism at the US State Department, joins me from Washington. Appreciate your joining us. Let me come to you first there in Washington, sir. Mr. Benjamin, your sense a day after this Orlando shootout. Are you convinced that this is ISIS at work, or do you believe this is a lone wolf who was inspired by ISIS?
I think that all indications right now point to him being a lone wolf who claimed during a call to emergency authorities during the shooting that he was pledging allegiance to ISIS then and there. And there's no indication from any of ISIS's statements that they had any previous knowledge of this individual, and I think that they have just claimed him as one of their own in the aftermath. So I do think that this is in keeping with a number of events we've seen in the United States involving lone wolves and some in Europe as well, and I don't believe that this person had a long-standing connection with ISIS.
Praveen, does this fit in with your also belief that the ISIS jumps in to take credit when they see such an operation and take responsibility and almost embrace the individual, but the individual itself is not part of ISIS but is inspired by the ISIS ideology, possibly, even though there are some reports suggesting that he was an anti-gay activist, he was guilty of domestic violence, lots of other reports also coming out.
I'd agree with that assessment completely. ISIS has drawn all kinds of people who have difficulty with their personal lives, who feel disenfranchised or alienated by the societies around them, and who feel attracted to a certain kind of ultra-violence. If you look at ISIS's videos, I mean, ISIS is far from the only group in the world that's done mass violence. You have other jihadi groups, you have Christian fundamentalist groups, you have communal groups in India who've all done violence. But it's the first group that brags about this kind of maximalist violence by producing these horror shows online. And it attracts a certain cohort of young men who feel drawn to this nihilist, barbaric violence. And whether it's young men who go off and do violence in their home territories, or whether they're young men who feel compelled to then join the Islamic State and participate in that violence, it's people who...
But a number of others are being indoctrinated by what they see on social networks, what they see on websites, what they might even see with an incident like this in Orlando, God forbid, could inspire them to try and do something similar here, which is the real fear.
Absolutely, and some of them have tried. I mean, the real worry is, I think that young people who a generation ago or a generation and a half ago would have found some sort of collective space in which to voice their grievances, would have joined politics, political life, collective institutions, today basically hang around staring at the net and find these little enclaves or ghettos on the net where you have 10 other kids reinforcing your beliefs, who have this echo chamber of people reinforcing their own belief systems, basically cutting themselves off from society, coming up with very strange values, being seduced by violence. And with their parents or their communities not having a clue what they're thinking, doing, and not being able to intervene.
Which really brings me to the question, Mr. Benjamin, is what does the US administration or indeed counterterrorism forces in the United States do in an incident like this? 9/11, you were clear who the enemy was, you could go target it, take out an Osama bin Laden, but what do you do here? A US-based an American citizen of Afghan origin commits an act like this. Who do you target? Who is going to be seen as the target? How do you settle and ensure that something that happened in Orlando doesn't happen again?
Well, it's a very, very great challenge for American intelligence and law enforcement. We have seen time and again that these lone wolf operators who do not communicate their ideas with others, and especially do not post on social media, or who do not talk about it on the telephone or an email, are very, very hard to find. And in fact, observing the step from extremist ideas to what we call radicalization to violence is profoundly difficult to identify. And the best hope that we have really is excellent community relations with Muslim communities within the United States, because those are most likely to be the people who will detect whether something is off with an individual.
Right.
And that's why it's so vitally important right now not to alienate Muslims living in the United States. They have to feel that they can trust the authorities, and that their information won't be abused or turned back against them in any way. And I think they have to really feel that they are at home in this country and that they're an integral part of our society.
Right.
And obviously that's a challenging thing at a moment when we're having a national campaign in which there's so much Islamophobia being voiced.
That's right. That's the worry. In an election year with Islamophobia at its peak, and perhaps even in this country, how do you then deal with a situation like this? I mean, how are our agencies going to deal with situations that are emerging?
Yeah, lots of lessons, I think, to be learnt in India from this. If you look at the crop of young people who've gone off to join the Islamic State, it's not the sort of, madrasa-educated fanatic of stereotype discussions. It's young people from secularized backgrounds, often professionally successful, with a notional interest in religion. These are young Muslims who've done professionally very well, but who encounter discrimination of terrible kinds. They find they can't rent an apartment in a Hindu majority neighborhood. They find that, the Indian secular dream is great till it comes to finding a house or trying to live the kind of life that their Hindu compatriots can. And these are the kinds of things that breed resentment, breed discrimination, and breed a ghetto of the mind, if you like, and lead small numbers of people, very small numbers of people down a violent path. It's something that I wish our political leaders and our society as a whole was doing some soul searching about. From Mr. Dickey's words, we know this soul searching is happening in America. Maybe it's time for some of us to start doing it as well.
That's right, and that is really the worry. Time for some soul searching. What happened in Orlando sadly could happen in any part of the world tomorrow, and that really is the fear. I appreciate, sir, you're joining us there from Washington. Praveen Swami, is always a pleasure having you here and giving us a sense of what this means really for India as well.